Hey guys, thanks for joining us. This is Monday night. Happy Freedom Day to everybody, 27th of April. It's a very quiet 27th of April. Normally we're all at gigs doing something productive, so we're going to do something else productive tonight. I've got a very good friend of mine, Simon, is going to be joining us tonight. He has fair share of experience, specifically when it comes to monitoring and monitor engineering, obviously on a whole bunch of fields, but specifically tonight, we've had quite a few requests to do a session specifically on monitor engineering and monitor land and go through the practicals and logistics and workflows of that. So we've got a nice discussion coming your way. Really appreciate everybody that's been watching our brief, and we've now on episode, I think this is 10 or 11. If I'm not mistaken. This week's going to have a couple. Tomorrow night's Marius. But I think tonight's going to be an interesting one. I'm going to welcome Simon in. There you go. You should be able to see him now. How's it, Simon?
Hello, Christo. Hello, everybody at home watching this. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure, man.
Hope everyone's having a good Freedom Day. I think a nice long weekend is what everyone needed right now.
As opposed to the nice haircut that we need. Getting a bit fluffy, yeah. Obviously Simon and I have been working, we've only really actively been working together, I think, for about 3-4 years now, roughly that.
Yeah, it's about that. I moved back to South Africa from the UK around the end of 2013. 2014 was sort of my reintroduction to the South African scene.
Okay. And yes. on that note, how did you find that? Was it obviously between the two worlds? I mean, technology is the same, but the environments and the working environments is slightly different from a construct perspective.
It was a learning curve, but in a different way. If you look at the UK and American industries, are two of the top live music industries in the world. I mean, every city has many, many live music venues. There's no end of bands constantly touring. Those places are more set up for live bands, for live music. So it's a much wider industry out there. Whereas here, it's a bit more specialized, shall we say. Touring is not a huge thing here. You get...
when we tour, it's Joburg, Cape Town, and we're done.
Yeah, and if Durban are lucky, sometimes they get a date out of one of the large acts coming through. But touring per se is not the same as the international market. It took a bit of adjustment, and when I came back here, I was completely unknown. I had to get out there and let people see what I was about. That I knew my stuff, knew what I was talking about. I don't know. Maybe this is a validation of that. I don't know. The fact that I'm here chatting to you.
Yeah. No, look. I mean, it's your stuff. I mean, we've had a good relationship. Slowly becoming friends. I mean, you're living down in Cape Town, so no, you've moved back.
No, I'm in Johannesburg.
I was about to say, yeah, I
lived in Cape Town.
Yes.
And I moved up to Johannesburg 2 and a bit years ago. So yeah, I've been Randburg based for the last 2 years at least.
Okay. So in terms of obviously what we're looking at tonight, I've prepared a bunch of questions and some experiences, but I think before I start asking questions, I think a lot of my questions will be answered in your in information that you're going to be sharing. What people don't know is we often have some really nice offline conversations. We start chatting like 20 minutes before these sessions, but even earlier in the day, and the days before, we've got chat groups going. We're sort of planning, and we end up almost, if you could be a fly on the wall for some of those conversations, they're just as good, and that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, we're just trying to have a conversation and bounce some ideas around and give people an insight into our approach and how we everything from problem solve. But hopefully, with experience behind you, get to a point where problem solving becomes not necessarily a necessity, but a good skill to have in the bag. But because of our preparedness and our way that we set up and the way that we approach things, regardless of the type of event that we get involved to, certain events lean themselves a lot more towards time, rehearsals, schedules, all these kind of things where there's a lot of predictability from the human perspective. And then you go flip that on its head and you get a festival where every 5 minutes you get, things are changing because people haven't arrived and this is changing, that's changing, and it's just crew from all directions and things like that. So both of those scenarios have different challenges, if I want to call them that, but your ability to manage that, and if we start speaking specifically about a monitor engineer, if you think about it, you're on the front line, where you almost first contact from a tech perspective to band managers, bands coming onto stage. And then, so without me saying too much, I'm going to ask Simon to jump in here and just, from your perspective, just sort of start painting the picture in what would be your approach to that position if you get booked as specifically monitor engineer. You already have when I say that and I book you as that, there's a engine that starts, if you can put it that way.
Yes, I mean, so like you were saying about how we use our experience to deal with pitfalls. I mean, that's one of the things that comes with years and years of doing it. You know where to look out. You know where the problem areas are. You know to spot them in advance. You know how to plan for them. And you know how to troubleshoot them on the fly should they pop up, because things will go wrong live. They do. It's a known fact of life. Someone will kick over a drum mic. Somebody will send through an incorrect rider and not turn up for a sound check. And the first time you find out about a new instrument will be 5 minutes before that band goes on stage. They will, we've got 3 keyboards, not 2. All of this can be accommodated in your planning. You can allow for extra things. You just need to know, like I say, where the potential pitfalls are and how to best accommodate them on the fly.
So, I mean, that'll lead you, for example, if you start planning your channel list. We often, for example, I was talking about it the other night, I work in the odd and even pairs. And if I get to a 15 and I'm finishing a guitar section, I'll jump to 17 to start keyboards. That leaves 16 open. I'll label it as spare 1, if that's my first spare line, or vice versa. And I'll, even considering consoles, planning your stereo channels in the right place, depending on what device you're going to be on, you can or can't cross sections of consoles and things like that, or layers. And if you take that approach, by the time you finish the 64 channel list, you've got play in there for a line that goes down across the stage, where you've got to repatch onto a spare line from a physical perspective. But as well as that, if you know that you're going to have 4 keyboards for the whole show, I typically will have 5 on my channel list. You have that because they become maybe not a keyboard, but it might become an SPD, or it might become a DJ line, or something that wasn't on a rider somewhere, but it's a stereo instrument. And the same thing with microphones. If they say we've only got 4 BVs, I'm not prepping just 4 mics. You prep an extra set, which will be a mic and its monitoring and all its solutions and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's what when you say you can plan for these inevitable challenges that we do have.
Yeah, correct. I mean, so one of the things I do from the second I'm booked, I will start asking questions. Who's performing? Do we have a rider for them? Sometimes people don't know the answers to these questions because maybe the lineup's not complete. But, there's ways of getting the information. You can, if it's a renowned promoter, they're probably selling tickets on CompuTicket. Go see who they've listed as. Yeah, you can, you've got enough friends in the industry to put in some phone calls or some WhatsApps or emails. Go, hey, are you still working with this band? How are you guys approaching the show? Are you doing full band? Are you doing stripped back? Are you doing, and then you slowly start bringing in the riders. And then, the riders are key to your planning. They give you all the detail you need in order to come up with your input list, which is key. Your input list is pretty much the most important aspect of your planning. If you can come up with a comprehensive list that you and the front of house engineer and your stage techs can work off of, then that's half the battle won. And the way I like to approach it is you put all the riders back to back and you start going through them. What I normally do is I'll try start with, say, the headline act and make sure that absolutely all their channels are accounted for in one way or another. Contact the engineer, contact someone from the band, go, are you bringing a monitor engineer? Are you bringing a front of house engineer? Do you have a show file? All part of the planning. If they don't, you know that you're going to be mixing it at monitors. You can start accommodating things into the way you'd like to work, put things where you'd like to see them. And like you say, if once you've gone through all the riders, you've accommodated everyone's setups and you've got 4 stereo keyboards, add a 5th one. In fact, add a 5th keyboard, but put it on your downstage sub box instead of upstage.
Yeah.
So you've got 2 more lines downstairs to go to in an emergency, because you don't know. One thing I've found so far in South Africa is that you never get all the information you need. It's one of those things. It's an anomaly. Hopefully we can resolve it.
Look, I've got an opinion on that. Let me put it like that. An opinion on that is where, unfortunately, we have a large number of companies who tender and get work for festivals and things like that, who obviously would like to utilize their gear, for example, as much as possible. So when a rider states consoles or XYZ, like things like that, and there are budgetary concerns, and I understand that completely. So the minute you start switching out, for example, even just a console, the engineer might be okay with it, but that means his show file is no longer compatible. And he knows the console, which means their sound check takes longer, which means, the fact that you've patched 1-to-1 on his channel list, but on his show file, he was doing soft patching, he was doing a bunch of stuff, which even he forgets about, so it's a lot of things to think about. So, and riders are not, I think the word I want to use, riders are not respected to the degree that they should be respected in terms of what they actually offer me as a supplier to you, the client. If I take it on and I do it and I respect what you're asking me, then the whole thing is just easier. But if you don't and you start compromising, or I've been in scenarios where they didn't even contact an artist about changes, they wait for them to get there and then they jump on the manager and they say, oh, sorry guys, but XYZ. And then you start with this vibe.
Yeah. And I think, just to go back on your point, I think one of the reasons why riders aren't respected is because a lot of the riders I've had to deal with are just not worthy, in some cases, of respect. There's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of gray areas. The information contained in these riders is just not up to scratch. So I think, for some of some of your students watching this, one of the best lessons in live sound would be how to create a proper rider. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to list all the most flash equipment. What you need to put in it are the minimum details that the artist needs to perform properly. And I think, if, for example, if you go to that to slide 1 that I showed you,
that one, yeah. Yeah, it's on now.
Okay. So let me just pull it up here so I can have a look at it.
Random band. I haven't heard of them before.
Exactly.
Are they like a pop band?
Exactly. But, if you're working on a festival and you haven't heard of Random Band either, what do you know nothing of them. So what you'd want there is as much information as you could possibly get to give them the tools they need to perform properly and get their music across to the audience. And so you get, to start off with, you get the band's name, you get 4 faces, 4 blobs, 4 whatever, and a basic description of what they need. Now, this is, I mean, I'd like to say that this is a ridiculous example, but
I've
you've
seen
probably
many.
I've actually seen ones worse than this. So just to start with, we need a drum kit with 4 toms. And then when you get to their input list, they have 3 toms.
Yeah.
They ask for 2 guitar amps, or they don't ask for any guitar amps, but then in the input list, there's guitars. This tells me nothing. It doesn't tell me who plays what instrument. It doesn't tell me who the lead vocalist is. It's, you know, a drum kit. What kind of drum kit?
Yeah.
What is the drummer endorsed by someone? Do the guitar players need Fender amps, Marshall amps, Roland amps? And then, you know, there's the surprise keyboard that isn't in their backline requirements. There's no detail. There's no, we need 3 guitar stands.
Yeah.
We need 6 jack to jacks. We need power drops down on the downstage edge. We need, our drummer's got a click, and he needs a hardwire return to listen to a click track.
But there's no ears on the rider.
Exactly. So looking at that, and if you're putting together a festival or a show and you get a rider like this, and it happens, we get these kind of riders through, you go, what am I meant to do with this? What can I possibly glean from this information? So in a way, I'd like to, if I can impart one bit of advice on the people listening tonight, it would be to pay a bit more attention to writing riders, because all that, only good can come of it.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely, you know, if everyone pays a bit more attention to their riders, then people will start taking the riders more seriously, and people will start asking questions instead of just turning up to a show and you get what you're given, which, you know, straight away people, you know, then the band are defensive. They're like, well, that's not what we wanted. It's like, too bad. This is what you're getting.
That's what we got.
It's not the way to create a constructive relationship with an artist. You want to accommodate them. You want to put them at ease. You want to make them comfortable.
Yeah.
You want them to see you, the monitor engineer, someone who's got their back. You want them to be able to go on stage feeling like, well, we're unsure about, you know, we don't know. Is this going to be good?
What else is wrong?
You want them, what else is going to go wrong? You want them to go on stage going, we're going to have the best show ever. So the more you can do, the more we can plan for it, is reliant on the amount of information we receive. So if we could go to the second slide, this is going to be...
it's the Wittenberg one, yeah.
So this is a rider I did for my friends in Wittenberg. So straight away, you start off with the band's name. You put a date on it, a revision number, anything, something to show that when that is from. The amount of times we've turned up, you know, we've got a rider through from 2013 for an artist, and they turn up to site and go, that rider we haven't used for years. How did you get it? Put a date in it. Put some kind of information to show its relevance. Put your contact details right up there. So there's a name, there's a phone number, there's an email that whoever's reading that rider can call you, WhatsApp you straight away and go, is this rider relevant?
Yeah.
And you go, what revision is it? What date is on it? And if they go, this. Yes, that's the most up-to-date rider. No, it's not anymore. Here's a new one. What's your email? I'll send it to you. Just as much information as you feel is necessary to give the people putting the shows together the best idea of what it is you need. It will, this will dramatically improve, I think, the way festivals happen, communication, and and then the end product is the crowd's enjoyment. People will go away enjoying the show more. you can scroll up on the, I don't know, obviously I can't see this rider, but, you know, make
Sound
sure this,
requirements.
yeah, you put in your sound requirements. Put in your channel list. Make sure there's no ambiguity. If you have asked for a kick drum, a snare drum, 2 toms, don't put 3 toms on your input list. Put it, even if the band sometimes have an acoustic guitar in their set, but at this particular festival they're not going to be playing the acoustic guitar, leave it in the input list. So at least, you know, if I was doing an input list for a festival and I saw someone with an acoustic guitar, if I see 3 bands asking for an acoustic guitar channel, great, in it goes. If I see 1 band asking for an acoustic guitar channel, you start wondering, like, well, could we put it somewhere else? Especially if the space is tight.
I like your comment there. If in doubt, please email or call. Again on page 2.
Exactly. You know, it's don't leave nothing to chance. Don't have someone risk your show because you didn't give them the information.
So you've done something here. I want to just, I'm at the unacceptable digital consoles for front of house and monitors included. So you got the SI, you got the no Behringer, you got no Yamaha O1V, O2R, O3D, LS916, Presonus, Mackie. Now I've done the similar thing with clients where, and then people will read that and go, oh, so you don't like the Yamaha or you don't like the SI. And what they don't get is the reason it's not in there is you've got the show in mind. You've got your technical flow for the show in mind, the workflow for the show files that you've got. But there are limitations to these consoles that basically means this console will not be able to let me do the show in the way that I would like to or that we need to run the show, whether it be effects, monitoring, front of house control, all of those kind of things, as well as workflow. You know, it's not about, you know, I own an SI.
It's not snobbery.
Exactly.
It's about what gear you are comfortable with. It's about what consoles you're used to using. If you're turning up to a festival with no sound check and a 10-minute changeover, you don't have time as an engineer working for a band. You do not have the time to do a crash course in a new console. If it's a console you're familiar with and you have a workflow or you have a show file, you know, your workload is cut down immediately. If you now have to learn a new console, straight away you are anxious, you're nervous, and that translates.
Yeah.
If people will see that, okay, our monitor guy is not 100% confident. Should we be worried? It's not. The people reading the writers, to a large extent, I hope they understand that it's not a matter of snobbery. It is just about what people are comfortable with, what they feel they need to make the show a success.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's what it comes down to is like, you know, people will read. I've had comments from engineers at festivals and stuff where they've seen the rider that I've sent, and then they'll make a comment about, oh, so you don't like this microphone, or you don't like that, or you don't like, and I just don't even know. I don't. Most of the time, I just ignore it. I just laugh and exactly what you just did. I'll just like, you know what? I'm not here for that. You know, we can talk about this later, but this is what I'm here for this client with, and that's what we're going to do. I really don't care about what you're thinking at this point in time because you're not in the same context as what I'm in, you know. And as opposed to someone that'll phone up and say, listen, we really cannot get hold of this. Can you either bring one or make your own plan, whether it be a microphone or anything like that? I'd work with someone like that any day because then I've also got time on my side to speak to a client, to speak to an artist and say, listen, when we get there, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge because X, Y, Z. So just give me 5 minutes when you do the wedges. I've got to change something. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. It's communication. You know, and an artist that walks onto a stage where he's already aware of what's going on and what the challenges are, you know, he's at ease because he knows that, like you said, you've got his back. You know, I often travel where I'm alone with an artist. So I'm on stage, I do changeovers, I do setups, I run to front of house, I do different things. So I need the guys there to have my back so that I can have his back. And, you know, the client needs to know that I've briefed the guy doing monitors on what's going to happen on this side. And, if I want to run, for example, the one client I work with, it's just one guy with in-ears. I run his feed from front of house if I'm at front of house because I can see his face and I've learned to read his face. And then I'll tell someone that I need a patch to front of house for the in-ears. He goes, "Oh, don't you think I can do it?" And it's like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying for the ease of this scenario, we've got 5 minutes, just get it to me. I can dial it in without even thinking about it, and then, but the artist is also more, if it's not 100%, because he knows me, he knows with expression and some indication, I'll get it there. And I'll probably won't get it perfect, but he'll be happy. Whereas if it's an unknown person, he doesn't know how to communicate, and then that flusters someone, and it's a different story. So it's about communication. I've had other people that I've traveled with where I go ahead to the venue, and then I phone back to the band manager and I say, "Dude, you guys have got a call time for 2 in the lobby. Stay. I'll let you know when to get ready for. I've got a lot of stuff to sort out here, and we've got time for it. If we don't have time for it, obviously, then I'll still phone and say, listen, when you get here, I need you guys to be in your positions ASAP. We don't have time. We've got problems. But the idea is it's that communication and having people's back and working with people that are that understand what you got yourself into. And if you're at a festival and you're running Monitorland, you've got engineers coming in. So how do you? What would be your take on, sort of stepping back? I know there's some guys that say, "No, I never step back. Tell me what to do." Where's your headspace?
That's a slippery slope. There's, again, if I was turning up to a festival, as I put myself in that engineer's shoes. If I was turning up to a festival with one of my bands, I'd want to be able to get on the console and mix how I see fit. A lot of the times, if there's a guest engineer, monitor engineer, a lot of times I'll know the person. In which case I can go, sure, here's the console, here's how I've routed the auxes, here's the graphics, here's how you get to them quickly, here's the effects engines I've set up, here's where they return, these are your wedge numbers, side filter on this mix. And you can give them in about 30 seconds, you can give them a rundown of how you've built Monitor World.
And it's probably not the first time you're speaking about it.
Exactly. But then if it's someone I don't know, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I'll be like, well, you're traveling with the band. The band have asked you to be there and they're paying you to be there. So in which case, if they don't have a show file, it's like, well, look, I'm not going to get precious about my work. I've set up, one of the first things I do at a festival is I set up a bass scene that has all my channels labeled. It has a basic EQ on every channel. It has gains. It has an EQ on the wedges. And I say to them, look, here's my bass scene. Go for it. And if I see the guy is struggling or he's pushing the wrong button or maybe he feels intimidated, because, it's an intimidating environment to be in. If your band is performing at Joburg Day for the first time, it's a big setup. There's thousands of people. You feel the pressure as a monitor engineer. You don't want to mess up, but you also, some people don't want to feel like, they don't want to appear like they're out of their depth. And I'll just lean in and go, if you want to, if you're trying to cue something, you want flip to faders, press this button, do this. Or if you see them taking a wrong turn, you can just direct them. There's no point.
Yeah, direct and not correct. That's a good way of saying it. Yeah.
There's no point throwing someone off a console. I also want the guest engineer to feel like they can trust me and they can ask me questions, and I'm not just going to sit there, roll my eyes, and, oh, you're a guest engineer, I'm off for a coffee and leave.
I've had that.
I'm going to sit there. I'm going to sit there and I want to make sure they are comfortable. I mean, as much as, like a festival scenario can be tiring, it can be, and you would sometimes like a break to go do something. Just go to the toilet even. And a guest engineer comes along, you go, great, I can hopefully get 5 minutes to leave the stage.
Yeah. And
but
tell
I'm not
tell him
not
to drink that Lucozade on the side there. It's not Lucozade.
Well.
Yeah.
We'll cover more of that in the tip section later.
Yeah.
So, yes, I mean, the whole thing is, again, coming back to say, sound company owners who get their backup because you don't want to use their microphone, or it's not. I think people need to learn to put egos to one side, and it's not about someone not liking your microphone.
Mm.
It's about getting the show. The show must happen. No matter what happens, the show must go on. And you can either be a part of it and help it happen, or you can be a speed bump and just get in the way, irritate everyone. I prefer, it's not to say, no one's perfect. It's not to say I don't get annoyed sometimes.
So what do you do? Say, for example, you get booked by, company X, and they book you for, running the stage. And then once you've accepted the date and you've done the booking and all that, and then they say, oh, but we've got I'm not going to mention brand names. We've got X console, and then you look at the riders and you can see, for example, what you're being asked to do, what you're going to have to be delivered on this is not going to work. And you then have to approach the subject of saying, is it possible to get another console? Or, how would you deal with that situation? Or how have you? Because I know it's happened.
There's a few ways to go about it. If the company is large enough and you know that they've got other consoles, you can draw their attention to the fact. I mean, a lot of this can happen in a few different scenarios. They don't have all the information. The promoters just asked them for a price. I'm doing a show. Please, I want to know how much PA is. And they've quoted, and the promoter keeps beating them up on the price. I don't have that. Can you give me more discount? Mm. So they change console to make it work in their whatever accounting firm where they're running, software they're running, sorry. And they keep changing the console until a price that the promoter finds acceptable works. That's one way that this has possibly played out. The other way is someone at the PA company or the production company is an ex-lighting person or stage manager. They don't actually have technical knowledge of audio. And you can go to them and go, look, I see what you've done, but this is not going to work.
Hmm.
And it does happen because they might just look at one rider that's got three mixers across the front, a drum fill, 3 sets of in-ears, and 4 radio mics.
Yeah, so 12 ounces is fine.
And that's what they put on the quote. They'll be, okay, that's the headline act. That's what we're putting on the quote. And then you have to draw their attention to the fact that, look, they might be the headline act, but there is a much larger band, 2 bands before they go on. And they've asked for 8 sets of in-ears. Or they've asked for 8 sets of wedges. It's never never as easy as it seems. And you can't just steam in and be, like, oh, this isn't going to work. You've got to approach it diplomatically. You've got to let them know that it's not going to work. And ultimately, it's up to that person to see that it's going to reflect badly on their company if they don't deliver
exactly
to the specifications that have been required. But, sometimes you do get the people who will just dig their heels and go, no, that's it.
Mm.
Then you start looking at ways you can make it work. If someone's asked for 3 sets of stereo ears, you contact them and go, look, is mono okay?
Yeah. But it's communication, yeah.
Yeah, we come back to the riders. You get hold of them, you go,
yeah,
listen, this is what it is.
Okay.
The promoter doesn't have money, but how do you guys feel about mono in ears?
Yeah.
How do you feel about this? Could we change that? You've asked for a Sennheiser 9000 series microphone. There's only this many in the country, and they cost far too much. Can we give you a 935? Can we make substitutions? Can we make it work?
Or have you got to bring?
Yeah. Have you got your own? Have you got that microphone that you can supply, and we'll leave a hole open for you in our patch list?
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've done that one. I think the rider thing, it'll crop up all the time. It's a thing that just sort of sticks its head out. Like you said earlier, you're planning based on your channel list, and we did quite an extensive one a couple of weeks ago, where I actually demonstrated on a channel list just how much information you can stick on there. So let's move on now. Let's get down to some practical sort of workflow type scenarios. So you standing behind the console, you're preparing for, say, X Festival that's going to happen. You've got your riders, you've got your channel list set up and all that. What are some of the practical elements for yourself that you sort of need to do to prepare yourself for, pre-client or pre-artist?
Okay, so to say we've got our channel list, we've come up with a channel list between you and myself, and I know what console I'm going to have. So part of my planning for myself would be to just do a basic show file. Something, say we've got a 64 input channel list. To sit on the day and label the console with 64 inputs and say 32 outputs, it takes time.
Yeah.
Whatever you can cut down on time during the day, time saved on site is obviously time gained. It gives you more, and there's a lot that you have to deal with on site. So if you can label your console, if you can label your output mixes, from that point you can load your file, you plug in all your inputs, you plug in all your outputs, you send pink out to your wedges, you send pink out to your ears, you make sure everything is patched properly, you're getting everything in the correct hole, you do a line check. Then you start looking at, you start putting, you've got a 52 and you've got an EQ that works on a 52. Dial it in.
So let me ask a question there then. So in the modern day, we've got wedges and we've got in-ears. So when you say you've got an EQ that works on a 52, how do you bridge that gap? Are you EQing for wedge effectiveness? And assuming it's like for a 52 is on a kick, obviously you don't want, 50 hertz thumping over your whole stage. And ears can't handle the low end anyway. So how do you approach that?
That is a very good question. When I figure it out, I'll let you know. No, you have to come up with, like I said, with your bass scene, you have to come up with the best of both worlds. You have to find something that works for both. There's no point having a killer kick drum in a wedge that sounds like somebody hitting a cardboard box in the in-ears. You have to compromise to a certain degree. What I have done in the past is I've tended towards using the 91 more in the ears. Have two mics on the kick drum. Use the 52 for the weight in the wedges, so that for the bands that really want to feel the kick drum, it's there.
Yeah.
But in in-ears, you've got another mic that's better tailored to the in-ears.
Yeah, I think that's what I was sort of leading you towards, that where on most riders, there's a question: kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom. Do you mix everything into everything? And no, you don't. You tailor it and you use it specifically.
Yeah, and then you can. As each band comes up, if you get, a band who are purely in-ears, if you've got a bass scene to work from where you've got a start point, you can then tailor that 52 to go into it in. You can dial it in. But if you're starting from scratch for each band that walks up, you're still going to be turning dials by the time they're walking off stage.
Correct.
You have to be prepared. You have to have a start point, like vocal mics. You have to have a gain that you know is loud enough in the wedges and that is loud enough in the ears. So one of the things I'll do with the in-ears is once I start with the wedges because that is an obvious feedback risk. I will find a gain that is comfortable. Well, I know where I can push that gain to on that mic that it's not going to feed in the wedges, or it's just going to be on edge in these 2-3 frequencies. And then what I'll do is using that same gain, I will then set up my ear sends. If I have to set the in-ear sends 3 dB hotter, 6 dB hotter, that's what if I have to set the packs to high gain mode to compensate for the fact that there's less gain coming off the console, then so be it. I tend to start with the wedges because that is the obvious, like I said, the feedback risk. Then move on to the ears. Then get them. Find the happy medium. So you can always later, like I said with the ears, if you need to push the ears more, you can. You've got it there, but you know what the push-pull relationship's going to be. If you've got that vocal mic in the side fills and in the ears, you know where you've got to. If you want to suddenly gain, extra couple of 3 dB on that vocal mic in the ears, you know that 3 dB is going to push the side fills over the edge. You can pull your side fill master back 3 dB. Again,
but it's having that awareness of that construction.
Yeah.
So
knowing your gain structure and knowing where you can go to.
Yeah. So I want to unpack something you said now quickly. You spoke about obviously starting with your wedges, getting a microphone, setting a gain so that you know where you sit on the wedge so you don't feed. So obviously, I use the word old school. Like I'm 28. What are you? You're 23. So we're not old school.
Almost 24.
Yeah. There's the term that goes around, and you see guys do it. Some guys, I have seen guys use it effectively because what they're doing while doing this is towards a specific outcome that they're aware of. And then other people that watch them or see them do this don't look at the whole system, and then they go and do this inefficiently, which kills it. And I'm talking about ringing out wedges. So ringing out, for those who don't know, is you push a wedge till it starts feeding, and you use a graphic EQ and you pull a fader down, and it's not feeding, you push it a bit more, and you try and find all your nodes and hotspots on frequencies. And I'm not going to answer it now. I want you to answer, what is the difference between finding the hotspots, finding those frequencies so that you as an engineer know, and fixing it?
Okay. So it's a fairly complex question because one of the first things you want to do, first of all on a vocal mic, is get your gain structure. You want to know. So one of the first things I'll do is I'll speak in quite a loud voice. So imitate someone having a really good shout and I'll use that to control my dynamics. I don't use a lot of compression. I'll just set a compressor right where I know it's about a clip. I'll put it a dB below clip, and I use fairly hard compression in monitors. I'll use like a 4, 5, 6 to 1 on a vocal because you're not trying to. In most cases, the artist wants to hear themselves. They don't want to be. You don't need to control the dynamics as much as you would in front of house.
Yeah, but you're not sitting with you're not doing a low threshold, so it's not sitting on the compressor.
You're getting it to say that at +4, the first clip light is about to come on. So I'll set the compressor to like +2. So once I've got that point, I'll come down in level, and I'll listen to my voice through the wedge, and I'll go like, how is it tonally? Is there too much low end, too much mid range? And here's the one of the crux of the matter is that everyone's voice is different. So you can only get a basic idea. I mean, my voice is terrible. I hate hearing my voice back, but it's the only voice I have, and I have to use it. So using my voice, I'll go and there's a bit too much 630 coming out of these wedges. It's a bit muddy about 160. Then I'll go back up to the higher level and push the gain. What's happening? Okay, now it's starting to get excited at 4K, 8K as a result of that. The harmonic, 4K to 8K, those two are now starting to ring. And then I store it in the memory bank. You go, when I go to this gain, these two frequencies become a danger.
Sure.
What a lot of people tend to do is they set the gain possibly too high. Then they go out there, 2.5K, 3K15, 4K all start taking off, and they just cut it. So straight away you're cutting a lot of the frequencies that people rely on for clarity.
Exactly.
They go, oh, it's feeding back, so let's kill it. Not the right idea. If I can, let me see if I can get this. Let me see if I can do the screen share idea.
Well, if you can whistle right, we can see the frequency behind you on smart. Just hit the right notes.
Okay. Oh, have I done this right?
Still seeing you.
Okay, sorry, you're just looking at yourself now, and here this should be. Okay, so this is an M7 graphic in the module. So, in an ideal world, so this is flat. So in an ideal world, you want your graphic to look something like that at worst, at its loudest point. You don't want to be robbing all the because remember, for every time you pull out, say, 630, can you see further along?
Yeah.
You see further up, the harmonic effect is pulling other frequencies out. So you don't really want to be any worse than this. If you end up with a graphic that looks something like this, you're way off. You've actually become, you're actually causing your own problems here, because you've removed a lot of the frequencies everyone will need for clarity, and you've gone too far.
Yeah, this is when you will get to a scenario where, that wedge is loud, it's screaming, and the song will end and they go, I can't hear myself, because there's no distinction left, there's no life left.
And it's not particularly clear, and it's not particularly pleasant, and people just keep pointing at the wedge or the vocal mic going. So
and then the engineer goes, but it's so loud, why can't you hear yourself? Meanwhile, it's not something that you're used to, because the vocal is not sounding true to itself, and there's no life in that wedge left.
Exactly. You're better off. I mean, the whole reason we use certain microphones, the whole reason we use an SM58 or a Beta 58 or a 935 is because we know tonally how it sounds. We know it's good on vocals. We're not using a Beta 52 on a vocal. The reason why people rely on these mics is it's a good yardstick. People know what they sound like. So if you are hacking a wedge to pieces using one of those mics, you've done something wrong further up the chain. You need to go back and relook at it. Maybe you've just brought the gain up too much.
So let's use this moment in time to speak about something I mentioned about 2 weeks ago. I was speaking about efficiency of wedges, and of a speaker, the cone, the drivers, all that, and then I mentioned a bit of manufacturers. If a speaker's been in the field for 6 years, 7 years, doing outdoor events, being on the coast, all of that, it loses its efficiency. When I speak about efficiencies, that graphic you just showed us, there's elements like that creeps into the response of the drivers, and you start having compromised, if I can use that word, delivery of expectation. So you're sending X, but it's not giving you X. So that's why even if you buy a brand new, so for example, DMB M4, and you got another one that's 5 years old, you can't pair them up, because they actually do sound completely different. And the manufacturers or people go, but it's the same thing. No, it's not. And then on the flip side of that, building your own wedges, or using, how can I say this in a nice way, using not recommended wedges for wedges, or not recommended speakers for wedges, just because they're loud and got a lot of power behind them and sound good on a PA doesn't mean they're going to work as a wedge.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of companies that produce what they call dual function speakers. For example, I'm just going to JBL PRXs. You'll see they've got an angle for them that you can use them as a stage wedge, And on the back of some of them, there'll be like a monitor switch. Personally, I mean, I don't want to single out any, but I never ever engage when I've had to use them as monitors. I'll never ever engage their monitor switch because all it seems to be is like a 6 dB high shelf from about 2K, and it's pretty much the same thing as that graphic I showed you. And yes, so coming back to the age of wedges and things like that, properly maintained gear will serve you very well for a long time. Unfortunately, in this country, things are expensive. Gear is very expensive. Gear also got some Clear Brothers 12 AMs. Now, Clear Brothers 12 AM is one of the best wedges, still one of my favorite wedges in the world. I mean, that curve I showed you earlier, I could put that on a pair of 12 AMs and know it'll be safe as houses for days. It'll go loud. But those wedges need to be, I mean, they've got a JBL, I think it's a JBL horn and an EV 12-inch. They need to, the drivers get tired. In amplifiers, capacitors get tired. They start to swell. The amplifiers slowly lose their efficiency. It's a very difficult thing. I wouldn't want to own gear in this country because it's an expensive thing to do. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the other night, for example, on JBL, on different levels, on the MI market, on the tour market, especially on the tour market, they on an install or on the traveling tour market, they have a recommended timeline on replacement drivers. So if you're touring, every 3 years, replace all drivers. There's been I haven't looked at the VTX and the latest ones, but I know, for example, on the previous ones, late 90s, early 2000s, on the SRXs and all that, they actually stated in a document their recommendations on maintaining efficiency, when it gets to X amount of time period. And when you change them, you've got to change all of them. So if you've got 48 boxes, that's a very expensive exercise for boxes that still work. But here comes the crux. If you understand what's happening and you've got a good system tech, you can still get efficiency. You can still work with that system, but you have to understand that you might want to add a couple of more boxes if you're doing PA, for example. Add a couple of more boxes so that you can bring back your headroom up, so that you don't push the boxes past a certain point, so your curve starts changing, all that. And on wedges, it's the same thing. You don't want to just go louder.
Yeah, and in the case of, for example, of an M4, in passive, you say you've got the new M4 and the old M4. In passive mode, they sound completely different. And you think to yourself, well, let's try them biamp, because all of a sudden you've reduced the amount of bandwidth that one amp is trying to push out.
Yeah.
You've now separated it into a low frequency and a high frequency, allowing the two tired drivers to work a bit more efficiently. So straight away, not only do you get more level out of it, but you'll also suddenly find, okay, now they don't sound as different. They sound a lot closer. I mean, a few years ago, when I was still in the UK, one of the companies I was doing a lot of work for, they bought 24 Clear Brothers 12 AMs at a steal. I mean, they were pretty much being given away because they were old, they were tired. I think this company had bought them in like 1994, and it was now 10 years later. They were still running on the old Crest racks. They'd never been reconed. They'd never been, new diaphragms put in unless something blew.
Yeah.
This company I was working for, they said, well, what can we do? I said, well, they spent the money because they got the wedges for almost nothing. They were prepared to spend the money somewhere else. So they got new drivers where necessary. And then they went out and got new modern power amplifiers and XTA crossovers. And we scoped we put the old Clear Brothers crossover, sent big noise through into an oscilloscope, and saw where all their curves were and everything like that. We matched that preset into the XTAs.
And all of a sudden you had a brand new system.
We had brand new 12 AMs for a fraction of what they would have cost new. So, there's a lot to be said for maintaining gear, for keeping it up to spec. I know it's not the easiest thing, but
yeah, it's got to happen.
It's got to happen.
So we got a question here from Katlego. The first one doesn't make sense. It's talking about riders. Why don't we do rider responses for local? Not quite sure what he means by that, but we did speak about that. And then his next one is talking about when you ring out your wedges with your mic. This is now going back to, because you haven't really answered my question on the ringing out and what that actually technically is. It's basically put a mic on a stand, and just push and find frequencies. Do you do that with the EQ on or off on that vocal mic? So once you've established that vocal mic, you've got a nice little tone. Do you ring out with that, or do you ring out with the EQ off?
No, I'll ring out. So I'll ring out with the microphone flat, just a bit of high pass filter on it. Then, not too high. I won't take it up to 160 or whatever. Start with it like 80. You'll still want to hear what the low end is doing on the wedges. Then I'll start with the EQ on, but not no frequencies pulled out. There's no point going with a predetermined EQ. You have to hear what each box is doing. There's no point just going, unless you know the wedges really well, something you use day in, day out. I start with the EQ in but flat, and then I go out and listen. I'll first start with it coming through the Q wedge. I'll send it to one of the mixers. I'll go like, see, where does it sound rough? If there's anything that jumps out immediately, I'll pull it.
Yeah.
Then I'll go out and have a listen to the wedge out front. And sometimes what you've pulled out at the Q wedge could be wrong, because say under a top, you've got some sort of reflection. So you have to go out with the microphone and listen to the wedges out front. So the ringing out of the wedges to me is finding the tonal imbalances. You know what your voice should sound like with that particular microphone. You go out, listen to your voice and go, that doesn't sound like me. Where doesn't it sound right?
Yeah.
There's a bit too much 200. There's a bit too much. And by pushing it, you get to find where the problem areas are. I don't know if that's answering more what you...
Yeah, so what I want to add to that then is what people need to understand, and we spoke about this the other night as well, and I think I was talking to... I can't remember. Where, I think it was just me by myself talking about frequency recognition and all that, and workflows and training your ear. And over time, we start recognizing frequencies when you were talking about, 640, 350 and all that. And it's stuff that we start recognizing even in a tonal scenario. It doesn't have to be clean tone. You start picking it up and you recognize it in the workflow. And if you start ringing out, you get 1, 2, 800 or 500. And so if we go, there's harmonics that happen. So if you hit out 500, 1K, 2K, 3K, hang on. Let me put them all back, pull out 250 slightly. You try and find the root frequency that is triggering all of those. You end up not killing your wedge that much. And this is, if you come back to like a lapel mic at a podium, a guy that doesn't understand that aspect will be EQing on what he hears. And it takes very little energy for high frequency to feed. That's why it's always the high frequencies first. It takes a lot more physical energy for low frequencies to run. And when they run, they come in slowly and then they go. But high frequencies can be short, sharp spikes. So if you can recognize the high frequencies, and sometimes it is just a sibilance, it is a reflection, it is the high frequency. I'm not saying it's always a root tone, but when you're ringing out and there's no one in front of a mic, for example, chances are you're finding what are the nodes on the stage, what's the reflections. And if you can find those low harmonics, that stops you from having to mess with the high mids and high frequencies, that gives you the creative freedom then to go and EQ and still do tonal control over someone's voice without having to try and fight against all those cavities that you made in the high frequency. So ringing out, if I want to just close this subject now, is something that if you understand what you're trying to achieve, and like Simon was saying, you do things so that they stick in your memory. If you're a monitor engineer and you hear a feedback, and I don't know if this is true for you, if I can have 14 players on stage, I can have brass, I can have vocals, all that. If I hear a feed, chances are 99% of the time I know exactly where it is and what mic it is, even in a group of vocals, because of having checked everything all the time constantly and working and sound check. Your brain identifies things. That's why it's crucial to listen to sources clean, listen to the sources in isolation, and going to the situation. If you go to monitor position at BVs, at vocals, at even the acoustic guitar, the electric guitar, if he's got a pickup and that kind of stuff. So when you hear something, it's not about, farming. You know from recognition where it's coming from. And that just comes with time.
Ear training is very important. I mean, it's good to find a frequency that you can recognize. I mean, 1K is the easiest one.
Yeah.
When you ring out wedges, if you can, I mean, it's great to have something like a tool like Smart that you can look at a glance and go, okay, but if you can recognize a certain frequency, go, is it higher, is it lower, as a start point, and then you can search for it on the graph. And what I also find myself doing sometimes is that with certain mics, I'll know. I mean, I know for me, SM58's for some reason around 700 hertz. Not 630, not 800, but around 700 is a little bit of ballpark.
Yeah.
So one of my pre-EQs sometimes, I mean, if I know I've got all 58s, I'll just put a little notch there. Instead of chasing my tail out front with a graphic, going 630, 800, and then killing all the octave notes further up, I'll just go straight and go, well, let me pull that out.
Yeah.
Straight away it cleans up. Same with 2K for some reason on that mic. If you pull 2K out, all of a sudden 4K stops ringing when you get close. It's just it's one of those things you have to.
Yeah, I mean,
the more comfortable you become with your gear, the more you learn its nuances and its little foibles.
And your ear, you need to trust your ear. I mean, that's where the training comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Francois's got a good question here, which I think. I'll come to you in a question now, Ben. But Francois's got a question here saying, I use in-ear monitors a lot with the band, and I made the mistake to give some of them access to the mixers so they can mix on their own. And the biggest mistake they make is they start pushing things up, and then they grab the master level on the pack and turn it down, or on the VCA. So if you're working with an app, for example, like a Yamaha or something, everything's getting a bit loud, pull the master down and then push faders, and pull the master down, push faders.
That's already too late, because if something's clipping, you're not solving the source of the clipping. You're just reducing the level overall.
Yeah. So one of the big things we do with especially packs, and whether it's a Zenny pack or a Shure pack, there's different, what we would call, I don't know what you would call it, not a hotspot, but a sort of like a starting point. You don't want to be flat out. You don't want to be too low. You want to get a point where if the artist needs a little bit more after fatigue and they want to turn up a bit, they can do that. And then you start your mix from there, because there's nothing as worse as handing out a pack with the level set at what you would think a proper level is, and then the artists turn it off because they're not on stage yet, and then when they switch it back on, they go to 2/3 of that, and then you start mixing, and their request suddenly just like, why is he should not be asking for what he's asking for, and what he's done is he's turned his master down, so that's communication and training. I make a massive concerted effort with all crew and artists, if I can speak to them, that it's vital that your level on your pack doesn't change from we start to we start. If you need to go overall up or down, when we're busy with sound checks, I'd rather do it on the console, because then I can set my pack as a reference to the same position you are. I can experience a similar scenario, and I think Francois's question leads us to the next one, which is personal monitoring, which is pretty much what he's asking about. So if you're working with, there's a host of brands of personal monitors. What would you say is your most common challenges you've faced with musicians in this regard?
Well, just like every speaker is different, every brand of in-ears is different too. So first of all, the end product is one of the problems, because the band will turn up, one guy's got Shure in-ears, another guy's got Sennheiser in-ears, another person's got Skull Candy or some other nonsense.
Or iPhone earpods.
Yeah, exactly. And like every speaker, every set of in-ears will sound different. Not only that, they also have different impedances, so they have to be driven at different levels. The more domestic ones are not ideal, but So what I like to do, like when I said earlier, when I work on the ears, I like to get to a point where I know that I'm sending everything at a decent level. If I know that what I'm sending to the pack is not clipping, and I can see on the transmitter that it's tickling the first orange light, but it's not clipping there, I know I'm in a good spot.
Mm.
Then I can go out, and what I try aim for is I'll try aim for 12 o'clock on the pack in standard mode, if we're using, say, PSM 1000s.
Yeah.
If I can standard it, if it's loud enough for me at 12 o'clock with a set of my ultimate ears or whatever, then I know I'm in a good spot, and I can speak to the artist and go, look, start off here or start lower and bring yourself up. If they're using a different brand of in-ears and, they come to me and go like, yeah, well, here's my pack and it's, maxed out, then I know there's a problem. And I go, right, I'm going to start you off in high gain mode, start with the volume down and bring it up gently. The problem that I find with giving musicians too much control, say iPad apps, that kind of thing, musicians, they want to have, they aren't engineers. They don't perhaps understand gain structure. They'll, I want it up. Oh, and now it's too loud. Bring it down. They'll turn everything else up, and then, especially in a quiet song, say, for example, it's a quiet song, all of a sudden everything comes up. Then I know it's too loud for the next loud song, and instead of backing the channels off, they just pull the master down.
Yeah.
By which point, snare drum's clipping, click track is clipping, the quality stays poor, and then
and then it's a problem. I think
it's a matter of training. If it's something that Francois is intent on following through with that band, I'd communicate with them, sit with them, give them a crash course to say, like, guys, what you're doing is wrong, and point out the error in the way.
Yeah, the mixing is what they want to be balancing, they want to be mixing, but they have to understand the technical implications of the flow of the audio from this point on. So your output, your bus levels, all that kind of stuff.
I would instruct them to leave their master volume where it is. Use if you want more, use the level on the pack. Turn that up, turn it down when you need. And make small adjustments to your actual mix. If they've got an iPad that's got all the channels they want, you need to do small mixes there. If you've got a way of locking out the master level, maybe it's worth looking into, but I can't really, there's no magic bullet for fixing the situation you've described. I think training and communication is probably the best.
Yeah, so I've done that and with our staff and our guys and our stage techs. One of the things when we do it, especially at festivals, make sure they know, for example, if there's personal monitoring on stage, they know how it works to death. They know the patching and the layout of what's on it as well, so they can navigate it. And then in a very nice way, not condescending at all, I'll get them and I've trained them to ask, if a drummer comes and sits, do you know how this works? Have you used it before? Yeah. And then first things first, master volume. Have it set to an appropriate level where there is a bit of play, like you said, but definitely not too low. And there's already a basic mix there. And then show them how to do it, and then state very clearly that just be careful, don't drop your master volume, rather do it on the mixes. And the most common, or the most common place that you would have to interact with a band member that can't hear himself is the bass guitar. The amount of times a bassist goes, well, I'm maxed out and I can't hear myself. And then it's basically what he's done is he's pulled his master level down and pushed his bass up, thinking I'm going to get more bass if I turn everything else down. You will if you do it in the mix. You can't turn your master down. So that's just communication and training, and I think that's what it comes down to. And if you're traveling with the band, I think you're in the ideal scenario to have those discussions and to do that training. Then, but it is something that just needs to get communicated well.
See, as personal, these personal mixes are good in a recurring environment. So say a church install where you've got a pool of musicians, not necessarily the same people every service, but a lot of familiar faces who come and go. That's a great place for those kind of personal mixes, and just get them, train them, it'll be fine. I'm not a fan of using these personal mixes in a festival situation with time pressure.
Yeah.
Because what you end up doing is using them like you would a wired belt pack. Because, if someone doesn't know how it works, they're just going to be looking at you the whole time, asking for things. And it's one of the stage techs is going to be running on stage the whole time trying to. And if they're wearing in-ears and someone's running on stage and trying to explain to them what they need to do, it's a mess. It's a mess. It doesn't work. I'd rather eliminate personal mixes in a time-sensitive environment.
Yeah.
I think they do more harm than good. They do have their place. I mean, if you've got a static band, say something like this is not one of the shows I work on, but say you've got something like Afrikaanse Skroot, where you've got a set pool of players, or like we were with The Voice. We've got a set band. We've got plenty of rehearsal time. And the guys are seasoned pros. They sit down. You've showed them how the unit works. They've learned how to store snapshots. So they know what song is coming up next. They've got a snapshot they can recall. They know that they wanted more click in this particular song. So you don't end up with that messy situation of halfway through a show, someone has to run out there and clean up what someone's done to a personal mixer. And what I also try to do is if it has the functionality, I try to turn off as many of the gizmos as possible. Turn off compression. Turn off effects. If they don't have a proper communication system for the band, leave the intercom on. But if they've got talkback mics, kill the intercom. Because there's nothing worse than one of them accidentally latching an intercom mid-gig.
Yeah.
And it's happened. I've seen it happen, and it's yeah. I prefer to. Maybe I'm a bit of a control freak, but I prefer to mix what people want to hear.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like you say, even if they've got a personal monitor, when things go wrong, they look at you. Even if they've got a monitor right here or a control right here, because if it's a drummer, he's playing help. You can see, he doesn't have to say it, you can see it in his face. And the only way you can help him if you've got control.
And some of the local bands have they've gone out and bought these systems, and then they try bring them along to a festival situation. And what works in a controlled environment, like a small rehearsal room, where the guitarist has his volume a lot lower, and the drummer's not playing like a jealous gorilla. It's they can set up a mix. Then all of a sudden they're on a festival stage. There's a huge PA blaring. The ambient noise is a lot more. Straight away, everything creeps up. All the volumes start going up. And in a case like that, there's nothing you can do to help them. You're not in control of their mix. You cannot listen to what they're hearing and make corrections. You can't go, well, you've pushed the bass up. Let me pull some of the mud out for you. There's absolutely nothing you can do.
Yeah.
So that's why I tend to avoid those kind of personal mixing systems. I think in some situations they do more harm than good.
Yeah. There are some, techno bands and stuff that travel with this built-in system. It's all electronic. They just plug and play. You get a left, right from them, and it's all in there. We've worked with those before. For them, it works, but they've come right down to a left, right, that we get, and everything is self-contained. But there's a lot of gear to travel with. So Michael Isaacs asked a question, which sort of leads into what you were just talking about. How do you deal with a band that's got rehearsal room syndrome, where they rehearse in a garage, everything's blaring around, little PA, everything's loud, 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 loud. Then they come onto a big open stage, and they want that same feel.
Yeah. Let them, what I tend to do in a festival situation is get a band up in a changeover. Speak to them through the wedges while the front of house is playing music. I'll I'll go out, we'll chat to the guys through the wedges, go, what do you guys need to hear? Then I'll get them all to play. What I'll try to do is, in the limited time I have, I will try and listen to their individual needs, get them to play 30 seconds of a song, and then quickly have another whip around of questions. Guys, what do you need more of? What do you need less of? What isn't working for you? There's that rehearsal room syndrome that Michael's talking about is predominant with a lot of new young bands, I would have thought. All of a sudden they've only ever used a small 10-inch guitar amp in the rehearsal room. Now all of a sudden there's a Marshall 4x12 there, and they just, their eyes light up, and the first thing they do is
put on 11.
Yeah, does this go to 11? And next thing, it's again, it comes back to managing people on stage, earning their trust as quick as you can, and then explaining to them. If you've got a young guitar player who's just, I've got it to, you go like, look, I know but you're kind of killing it. Could you bring your volume down a bit, and I'll push it for you in your wedges?
Mm.
And they, you could do that. They've never had wedges in a rehearsal room.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you put their guitar
in their face.
They're like, oh, okay, well, that's plenty of guitar. I don't need it that much now.
So
they're no longer drowning the stage. And
so another way that, and I speak about this in one of my lectures that I do at the college. An element that when they come to the stage in big festivals is generally side fills. And if you've got a sound in your side fills, regardless of the balance, you've got great rhythm section going through there. Just by bringing that in, another 3 dBs that gives you that little hug of the stage, So it's important to have that prepped already and that kind of stuff. Estienne has got a question for you. It's very complicated. Do you use plugins, and if so, what?
I do occasionally, depending on what console. But again, this comes down to what console you get, what you. I'm not a huge. I don't use a lot of plugins basically because not all consoles can run them. If you to use, say, Waves, for example, on a Digico, you need a Wave server. If you're not supplied with Wave server, you can't use. So I'm not reliant on plugins. What I do, my favorite plugin, I don't mind saying it, is the Wave C6 compressor, which is a multi-band compressor, which allows you to shape dynamics on a certain instrument. Say, for example, you've got a DJ, and the DJ has mastered his set, or,
he's breadboxed it.
A DJ in a band, shall we say.
Yeah.
And he's mastered his track on a set of beats by Dr. Dre on a plane on his way to the gig. You're almost guaranteed that from about 3K15, it's going to hurt. You know that when you put that through a huge pair of side fills or through some wedges, there's going to be top end for days. Now, something like a C6 comes in great there because you can, instead of having to hack things to pieces, you can just control those dynamics. Similarly with a bass guitar, say a bass guitar, there's just one note it's not great. You can find it with the C6 without having to then find that frequency in the EQ, cutting it, and thereby affecting the rest of the harmonics that it's producing.
Yeah.
I find the C6 is my favorite one. It's just the best tone shaping tool for me. I don't like to rely on them. I do have some extra ones. I've got some SSL channel strips. I've got some. I like, if it's a band that I know well and I'm working for, I'll put like the SSL bus master across the mix compressor across the in-ears.
So here comes the next question then. From a technical perspective, depending on how you're running those plugins, latency comes in. If you're on stage doing in-ears, you have to consider the plugins that are actually available to you in that context. At front of house, you get away with a lot because there's a natural ambient latency. But when you're feeding a guy directly and he's trying to sing, latency becomes a real issue.
That's why I only use plugins on a surface that's actually designed to take them. Like the old profile. I'm talking about the Avid, not the S6L, because now with the S6L, again, you can use the Wave server with the S6L. You can use a Wave server with Digico. I'll have a listen to it.
Yeah.
Basically, I'll rely on my ears. If my ears tell me there's something wrong, I'll get rid of it. But
yeah, I mean the
using like an analog sound card to run Waves native, that doesn't work.
Yeah,
Because
you're introducing
too much. You end up with strange comb filters and strange latency, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, plugins is again, people. I mix on the S6L, and people, oh, can I see your plugin rack? Can I see your plugin rack? I'm like, they look at it and they go, is that all you're using? I'm like, yeah. I tend to use my outboard like outboard, So I got I pre-build my effects rack. I've got a section that I've got for my if I'm on front of house for my master, my PA. If I'm on monitors, I've got almost nothing on vocal mics from a plugin perspective. I do everything on the channels as much as I can, purely for that latency. And I'll just use some effects racks, because most consoles, whether it's Soundcraft, Digico, Avid, whatever, I mean, their onboard stuff is pretty decent from what you're trying to achieve, in that live context.
Yeah.
We're not in studio, so there's already a proven workflow, and I mean the R&D that's gone into that stuff, and then you want to try and fix it.
I was just about to say, I mean, these manufacturers spend millions in R&D. They're not going to put out a console with a compressor that doesn't work.
Yeah, they don't.
It sounds terrible. It's going to be, what comes out the box is going to be perfectly usable. That's why I say, like, the C6 is my favorite, because it's a tool. It's a tone shaping device.
Yeah.
Which allows you to get away with a lot more.
Yeah, it's got
by not cutting things to ribbons to get rid of one frequency.
So Ben asked the question in regards to workflow. How long did it take both of you to establish a workflow that is practical, also helps perform very well and remain consistent in your shows?
Years.
Yeah.
Still refining it.
Exactly.
The day you stop learning is.
I think the workflow that the only workflow that's part of my life today that it is 20 years ago is the physical layout, patching, all that kind of workflow, and how I approach, for example, planning documents. But the technology has changed so much that it's introduced new opportunity constantly. I mean, every update and feature set that comes out for the S6L is like, ooh, that is amazing. I can use that, and it gives me this opportunity. So you because you've got experience and you've got time behind you, when you see a console and you see the feature set on a console, it's not like, oh, I need to try that. It's like, I know I'm going to use that. There's two different mindsets there completely. I'll see someone they'll make a big fuss about this new desk can do this. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I don't have a use for it. And then other guys will just try and use it because it's there. And they don't have a why. I'm always asking why, why you want to do it. And it's, and then he carries on his question saying, and if you are so set in your workflow, I'm paraphrasing, when you do have those guest engineers, doesn't that cause a problem for them? So I think the thing then comes in is if I'm in front of a house or if I'm at monitors and I know it's me. So if we're running one of these set shows like someone was talking about, I can get pretty creative in everything from my talkback setup to my routing to everything because it's just me. If it is a festival, you do try and keep your foundational construction as industry generic as possible. If that sounds right.
That's exactly it. For me, a large festival is not the time or the place to try out new things. It's always good to push yourself. It's always good to find out where your limits are or how, like you say, a new toy works, because that's how you learn. But in a situation like a festival, no. I tend to keep it. I want to approach the board layout in a way that if I was walking up to it as an engineer for a band, what would make the most sense to me? I'm not going to put channels on VCAs and hide VCAs on different layers and things like that. In fact, I mean, the only thing I'd put on a VCA as sort of the house monitor engineer at a festival would be my ambient mics for in-ears. As someone has something to grab.
Yeah.
Off the song, VCA, up go the mics in the ears. You just keep it as simple as possible for someone else. Also, if you were to fall over, if something was to happen to you, if you've hidden a multitude of things in different layers of the console, in far dark reaches that no one else can access or would think to look for, if something was to happen to you, no one can walk up the board and take over from you. And things do go wrong. I mean, you know, I might get called away. It might be, heaven forbid, a tragedy somewhere, and I've got to leave site. Or you want to make it at a festival, but you want to make it as easy for someone else. But
I mean, I've been in that situation a couple of years ago where I came in for a couple of artists at a festival type event, and the monitor guy had done exactly that. He was working on, you know, one of the later models. Not going to mention names. And he'd set it up very creatively, put it this way, to utilize feature sets on the console. But that meant the layering process and the workflow involved in doing basic stuff was 2-3 button pushes almost constantly. And on a monitor console, that is just, you're looking for trouble. And he was about to step out so that I could do my stuff. And I looked at it and I asked him a couple of questions. You know what? Stay right where you are. Give me a second pack. You keep your pack on. I'm going to tell you what to do. And I spoke to him, took his 1 year out, and I told him what to do. And then I was watching him. And then afterwards, I had a conversation with him. He took a little bit of offense. I was being very nice. And I'm saying, I see what you've done here. But just in future, think about other things. Because that's what you're doing there and there. That's very cool. But that's 3 seconds, 5 seconds, which is not needed in this context. You know, it's great. No one's watching. There's no camera on you. You know, you don't have to brag and pretend that you want to do everything, you know, and it's great to be able to do that. But you've got to think about efficiency, speed, adaptability, you know, and there's nothing worse than, and for me, my break point with any console is if I have to want to get to something and I've got to press more than one button, you know, and that's what I'll do. How can I do this? Click, 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 click. That's why some of the smaller consoles, for example, and there's nothing wrong with them. Again, like you're on your rider, I won't use those consoles on certain gigs because of that, you know, 3-page deep efficient. And now, if you go back 15 years, you know, when I was 12, that was the norm. You know, if you worked on an O1V, trust me, you could blindfold me. I would navigate an O2R and an O1V just by feel.
A3D, yeah.
Because I knew them that well. Because that's
Pro
what
one?
there was. Yeah. The Pro, exactly, yeah, with the wooden sides. And then as technology goes, they've developed away from that kind of workflow to a, you know, not a layered OS, you know, flat OS, because of navigation and speed that they want to give to the engineer. We're in a live environment, you know, visual, obviously in front of you from a feedback perspective. I mean, some of the first digital consoles that were out there had almost zero visual feedback, but they could do amazing. So you would have to, if I just wanted to look at something, I'd have to press some buttons to see something, not even do something. These days, you've got visual feedback. It's all there. You can see what you want to see, and your access is quite quick on all the top brands. You know, again, coming down to your ability on it. You know, if you're in the setup process or the config process, yeah, there's pages and menus and stuff, but you're in setup. Once you're in sort of operating show mode, there's very little that's not within a single button push. You know, on some of them you set up macros, on some of them you set up snapshots, on whatever you want to do, or user levels. It all depends on how you want to achieve it, but it comes down to your usability. And even you need to be careful with if you know there's going to be other people stepping up.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, for me personally, a festival is not the time and place to try out the new things. If there's a show that I know I'm going to be engineering from start to finish, that's my playtime. I will sit and I will, "Ooh, what does this button do? What does this feature do? What does this add?"
Yeah.
And then if it's something that works for you, you can figure out a way of integrating it at a later stage into a setup and show someone and go like, "Did you know about this cool feature?" And then, you pass on the information, you pass on the knowledge. But with regards to workflow, back to the question, you have to find a rhythm and a system that works for you, a way that makes you comfortable, and you slowly, it evolves over the years. You get faster at some things, and then what you have to do is you have to learn how to adapt it to various consoles. There's no point going, "I only use Yamaha, I only use Soundcraft, I only use." Our job as engineers is we put in front of something, we've got to figure out quickly how to get to the bits we need to do. We've got to figure out the ways that console works. And having a set workflow in mind of what you're trying to achieve will help you with that.
Yeah.
It'll save you chasing your tail on site and losing time, running over, having people get angry. It's I don't know.
I use the example of driving a car. Once you got your license, you can drive. And if you learn to drive on a stick, say a City Golf, and you get the opportunity to jump into a different manufacturing brand with, the first thing most people do is you switch on the wipers instead of the flicker, and, chair position and how to adjust the mirrors and where do you do this. And it's not driving. If you can drive, in other words, you've got a plan, you've got a plan of action, you've got direction of where you want to end up. The little niggles on how to achieve that is what are new experiences. But the end goal is still there. So you as an engineer, you can't walk up to a console and then try and figure out how to drive.
Yeah.
Or, what am I trying to do? What can I do on this? You've got an end goal in mind. So how does this help me do that? And if there's a tech there, a babysitter there or an assistant, those are the questions you ask, and you'll be surprised at how quick you can be, even on a console that you've not worked on before, because your questions are directive in terms of outcome. Instead of scratching your head and pressing buttons and going around, you can just ask 2 or 3 basic questions, and the guy can go, "Oh, there we go, there's the flickers," and then you're fine, because you've got the direction.
And in terms of workflow as well, that will also vary from band to band, depending on the personnel. You might have the world's most easygoing drummer, or but
have you met him? Have you met him? There's only one of them. You know that?
Who?
I don't know. I haven't met him.
Oh.
Like the lost unicorn. No, I'm kidding. There's some great guys out there.
And and you might have a nervous singer. So you know that once you've worked with them for a while, you'll know what each musician will want in their mix. So again, that affects your workflow. So you will also know who takes the longest to get right and how much time do I have. So you can focus. If you know you've got an easygoing drummer that if he can hear the track and the click, he'll
be happy to be dealt with later.
And then you can just, the rest is just dressing afterwards. You can but you know that you've got a singer that has to have, this kind of reverb, this this delay time. They want to hold the mic this far away and still hear everything. And you got your work cut out. Focus on the important aspects. Just adapt. You've got to be, you can't be set in your ways. You've got to be dynamic in the way you approach things. It'll vary. There's so many factors that will affect how you do things.
Yeah. And I think the word adapt is a good one, because adapting means you're taking what you've got and using it differently. So you've got to have something. I think that's what it is. And the way you just explained it, if I'm traveling with a band or if I'm traveling with an artist, it's about how they need, or how I need to work with them in this scenario. It's not about, you can't go to the band and say, "Listen, you guys are cool, but can we do things differently? Because I like to work like this." I want to see that conversation happen,
Exactly. Likewise, you can't go to them and go, "Guys, you know what? I don't like this console.
I don't like the song.
I don't like this console, so
Yeah.
It's going to sound rubbish. Sorry, you can't do that. I mean, you're not going to be working for them for much longer. You have to.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
have to be. You have to be that.
again, I had I witnessed this scenario between it was quite a high profile event. An engineer walked up and saw the console. It was on his rider, by the way. But he subs for the band, so he's not the main engineer. He's a dep, in other words. So he walked up. He saw a console. There was another console that he wanted over there, which was for a different band. And with the whole setup, we had like I think it was 5 consoles at front of house. And he's like, no, I can't work on this one. I have to work on that one. It's like, okay, but now you guys are coming in. We can't just change that because there's massive implications up the chain. It was quite a few years ago, and he literally threw his toys out the cot. And the HOD of audio came across calmly, just wait and let him calm down, and said to him, so let me get this straight. I'm going to go upstairs to your management now and tell them you don't know how to use the tools that they asked for. I just want to get my facts straight here. And this was now after about a couple of minutes of freak out, and and he stormed off. We didn't hear anything about it. About 20 minutes later, he came back, didn't speak to anybody, walked up to the console, put his stick in, did his thing, and got to go put in his place. It was quite funny to watch.
Yeah, no, there's I mean, another thing, you are going to encounter egos in this industry. There's no way of avoiding it. And just learning to deal with difficult people, and
yeah,
it's part of the job.
No, it's true, and I think the reality of the ego is always rooted in something, and in our case, it's either pride or insecurity. Insecurity in the sense where you don't know, or you're in too deep, and instead of asking for help, and like you were saying earlier with the guys when he's swimming and he's battling, you be open to take suggestion and to take help. I mean, I've asked for help. If I think back years, and even not too long ago, you walk up and like, help. Do you know how this works? And just ask for help. And learn to just. And again, this is where your workflow and your plan comes in. If you've got an idea of what you want to achieve, and that's what you're there to do, how you achieve that, whether it be someone else helping you or anything like that, as long as you achieve the goal.
No, exactly. I mean, I had a similar situation with this past 2019 Delicious Festival at Kyalami. I mean, I was employed to take care of one of the artists that was on there, but I was being paid to be there, and I was like, well, I'm going to get involved. So I was, on stage, and Revel was the monitor engineer for the day, and we got to a point. He's like, Simon, I need a break. I need to get off stage, and I hadn't used the S6L as a monitor console before. And you're walking up to someone else's work, so straight away you're like, okay, middle of a changeover. You've got to figure it out, and like we all know how to drive, like you said.
Yeah.
So I know where Revel was trying to get to. I just had to figure out how he does it. And Revel stuck around. He didn't leave. He didn't just go like, I need a break, I'm walking off. You got the board.
Mm.
He stood there and he went like, the S6L. If you want to do this, if you want to cue, you can go to the center screen, touch there. That'll do your mixes. You can swap here. You can do this.
I mean, I remember
after 5 minutes of pushing buttons, it's like, okay, cool. I've got it.
Yeah.
I know what you're doing. It's all good. Go have a break.
I remember the first
take
time we used the Avids. I think it was 2008-9 Coke Fest. I was babysitting front of house with a D show, and there was a profile on stage, and we had it was a whole lineup, Korn, you name it. And long story short, the Revel was the monitor guy on a PM5 for all the local bands and the house bands, and then the only internationals were using the profile. So they had their show files, walked up, and then something happened with 30 Seconds to Mars, and they didn't. The engineers, with both the engineers, long story. So I ended up doing front of house, and Revel had to do monitors on the profile, and he'd never worked on it before. This was before Gia's owned theirs. So I jumped off front of house because I realized this as the call came through. Ran to stage, plugged the stick in, loaded the file, showed the console came up, In those days, you could still plug the iLock in and out and pull it. So I plugged the iLock in, loaded the file. There it is, pulled it out. Revel's there. I said, there's Sense to Fader. There. Bye. And ran, in like about a 30-second crash course. But again, the mix was there. All he had to know is how can he access what he needs, and then he can work within it. And it's, it was a great gig. We did it in Joburg in Cape Town, the tour. But it's, again, the workflow made sense, and knowing how to drive does make it easier to jump in different cars.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've got some comments coming through as well. I don't think there's any more questions. We've been going for an hour and 40 minutes, believe it or not. It feels like 20 minutes.
True.
My coffee's cold. Well, actually, it's empty. Look, there's a lot of technical we can still get into. I think what I want to do is I'm going to invite Simon back on air, so he's under pressure, to do a part 2 to this where we can do a little bit more on console practical tips and tricks. Tips and tricks, do's and don'ts, things that make or break your experience as well as the artist's experience. Because I've made mistakes, you've made mistakes, or maybe you haven't. Maybe it's how you learn, but it's also owning them. If you make them, Raymond Green, I listened to him talk to someone once. The guitarist. If you're gonna play a bum chord, there's nothing better than playing it with the utmost confidence you can and own it, because number one is you'll never do it again. And, it's obvious. And if you make a mistake on monitors and stuff like that, you don't point fingers. You don't blame your crew. You don't do this. You take it and you learn from it.
Some consoles have got their mute and solo buttons really close together.
I've done that.
So you're going for solo, someone distracts you and you mute something on stage and the whole band looks over. Don't throw your hands up and point at the console because you're not helping anything. Just put your hand up. Own it.
The most common...
We all make mistakes.
Incorrect statement I hear, and I know that if you've said this, I'm sorry, but I'm putting you on the spot. The console didn't save right. If something technically went wrong in that regard, that's not the console. Sorry. It's a lack of knowledge or just a mess that you've made. So don't blame the consoles. These days, save and recall, unless catastrophic, rainstorm, water, and you didn't save it on a stick, which is stupid anyway, console swap. You can't blame tools. I remember sitting on Monitorland and look at the artists and the thing, I'm really enjoying the show. And then they give me this weird look. And I'm like, what are you looking at me for? Everything's fine. Whoops. And I'd muted him. Exactly what you just said. And he's like, what's going on?
In the early days of digital, session structures, file structures could be, there were difficult things to wrap your head around, especially some of the Yamaha stuff with different libraries, different this, different that.
All the flash memory stuff and all that.
Yeah, and you will get the engineers who will turn up to a festival with a stick going, I just want to load my input library so that I can, and then use your output section. You go, okay, I don't know how to do that. I've never done it before. This is going to be interesting. Let's see. And sometimes they did something completely wrong because, they'd only just learned how to do it. And they'd never really done it in practice. And so, yes, there has been the odd situation where we've gone, yeah, it didn't save right. But again,
you own it.
It wasn't the console's fault.
Yeah.
It's something we did.
Exactly.
We didn't save it properly because we didn't know how to do things properly.
I had a phone call, I think it was in 2006 or 2007, of someone that they'd done a whole day of sound checks with bands, saving. The last band arrived with the flash stick on a console, and it was new to the company who owned it. So they didn't understand it. It was the Yamaha M7. And they go, oh, you got a file. Oh, yeah, stick it in. Go for it. And then when they left, they're like, where's everything we've been saving the whole day? And then the guy phoned me and he said, listen, I just X, Y, and I said, it's an M7. He said, they put a stick in, yeah? I said, it's gone. It's flash memory, it's gone. And then one of the things I teach guys and I teach students, you put console, even on a VI or whatever, when you put your stick in, the first thing you do is save whatever people have got on there, and then load your stuff. Even if that's like the fourth or fifth backup, but you save it and you put it back when you're done. It's just good practice.
I've done it. I haven't had it happen to me, but I've done it to people because I'll be like, "Can I load my file?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, go ahead." I'm like, "Are you saved?" "Yeah, I'm saved." Plug the USB in, and then thanks. I'm finished my sound check. Save to my stick, pull it out, and then you see their face turn very pale.
Yeah.
As they realize that
But
everything
I asked you if you saved.
It's
Yeah.
again, you'll never make that mistake again.
Yeah. No, true. So I think what we'll do is we'll advertise a follow up to this in the maybe next week, early next week or something, and we'll get down into nitty gritties, and we'll advertise it. You guys can ask some more questions. It's difficult not having consoles being in lockdown, but we might, hopefully soon we can do some practical stuff as well. I know we had a whole bunch of pictures we wanted to get to tonight, and I think next time will be the ideal opportunity to get to those things.
Yeah, let's get into, if we do another one of these, let's get into sort of the more technical side of things.
Yeah.
Ways to improve your workflow, ways to just generally safeguard against bad sound on stage.
Yeah.
Finding yourself in
I mean, I didn't get to, I think I got to the second question on my list, yeah. But anyway, from my side, I just want to say thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your setup and making time to chat to me. And then I'll bug you again. Everybody,
it's a pleasure. I mean, it's not like I had much to do tonight or tomorrow night or the night after. So I'm going to be here. You got my number. Give me a shout.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you to Johan, who's operating in the shadows.
Yeah, thanks, Johan. Not many people know Johan is our master control. I'm sitting here in my little gaatjie, and Johan's doing all the online stuff and interacting with all of you and sending us the questions and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, if you want to do another one, let's go for, if people have technical questions that they'd like answered about Monitor World. Let's see how many questions you get, and then we can look at doing another.
Yeah. Cool, man. I think and there's some questions. Yeah, if we didn't get to your question tonight, we'll answer it in the next one. If you go to our channel, our Facebook page, we've got episodes 1 through 10 up already. There's a link to our YouTube channel as well, so just keep an eye on those things. Any feedback you guys have got or suggestions on topics you want us to cover, I think that's always a nice thing. We don't want to just be here talking about our own stuff. We want to give you guys some insight into things that you want to hear about. And tuning tomorrow night, chatting to Marius. That's going to be fun. And then, have a good day. Stay safe, people. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.